Hello people, today I'm going to be giving you guys my top 10 favorite comic book films of all time. With Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness coming out this Friday, I figured why not? I should give you guys my top 10 favorite comic book films. Because I don't have a video to put out, and I said, what can I do? So, I may have done this list before, and if I did, you guys can maybe go check it out, see how different it is, and because I'm sure it looks a lot different now versus how it looked then. So, yeah, let's get into number 10. Number 10 is SpiderMan 2002. This is not Sam Raimi's first film, but it is his first comic book film, and he nailed it the first time. Oh my god, what a perfect origin story this movie is. It captures all the themes of Spider-Man, and it captures exactly what Stan Lee and what everyone wanted out of a Spider-Man movie, and put it in this amazing film. Obviously, we can't talk about this movie without talking about Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin, because he's menacing, he's terrifying. This movie might have some of my favorite one-on-one battles between hero and villain, maybe ever. The battle between Goblin and Spider-Man at the end packs a punch, and it hits hard every time you watch it. This is one of those movies where I watched it when I was little, and I watch it now, I'm like, that's a good movie. You don't get that a lot. Most of the time I watch a movie when I was little, I think it was the best thing ever. I watch it now, I'm like, oh, it was mid. But now, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films are some of the only films I remember watching when I was little, and I was like, those were as good as I thought they were. But yeah, it's really one of my childhood movies. I go all the way back. This movie was released 2 years before I was born, so it's not like I didn't grow up with them like some other people did, but I did always have these movies in my life. So yeah, thank you, Sam Raimi. I love Spider-Man 1. Coming in at number 9 is The Dark Knight Rises. I know a lot of people don't like this movie, or I'd say a lot of people found this movie disappointing, and I wholeheartedly disagree. I think this movie lived up very, very well compared to The Dark Knight. And at some moments, there's more moments in this movie that gets me going than moments in The Dark Knight. I do agree that Dark Knight is a much better, film, but this movie has more of that cheer-worthy moment. Well, I don't say that word because the Oscars kind of ruined it. But the more satisfying, it's the conclusion, and I believe it's the longest one. I could be wrong. And I know some people have some problems with the whole scene with, what's-her-face dying, Telia, I believe her name is. When she dies, it's kind of stupid, and I agree with that, but that, to me, that's just, the biggest nitpick that's been so overblown, because, Bane is such a threatening villain. I believe Tom Hardy's Bane really was a solid follow-up to Heath Ledger's Joker. This movie, as a whole, is really good, I think. I can defend this movie all day long. What works about The Dark Knight is that its story, its script, its pacing as a film, it's, perfect. But where The Dark Knight does kind of lacks for me, and don't get me wrong, I love The Dark Knight, it doesn't really get those Bruce Wayne character moments as much as The Dark Knight Rises does. Because one of my favorite scenes, or if not my favorite scene of the whole trilogy, is where he's climbing out of the pit. That moment touches me every time. I love that moment. And it's just so symbolic, beautiful, and I know the whole plot stuff might not really make sense, but I'm not a person that cares about logic as much as I do characters and emotion that's delivered, because at the end of the day, when we're comparing logic to a guy that dresses up as a bat, or someone who gets bitten by a spider and gets superpowers, I don't question stuff like that as much as some other people would. But that's why I love The Dark Knight Rises. It delivers on that satisfying ending. It gives me the Batman I wanted. It makes me feel revitalized. It's a feel-good movie. It's really, I think, the perfect ending to Christopher Nolan's trilogy. Coming in at number 8 is Spider-Man 2. Yes, Sam Raimi followed up with an even better film. Spider-Man 2 is, for probably up until, I'm looking at these other movies I've ever, up until that time, the best comic book film ever made, because Spider-Man 2, doubled down on the Peter Parker drama. It doubled down on everything that worked on the first movie. It slowed down its pacing a little bit to make you flesh out the character even a little bit more, this character that we all love, Peter Parker. The only thing that doesn't live up to the first movie is I like Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin a lot more than Alfred Malona's Dr. Octopus, who is still at the end of the day a really good villain. It's just, well, his at the time his story felt original and new, but it's been very used over the last couple of years. But it, he's still a great villain. We have so many great sequences. One of the best sequences of the movie is where Sam Raimi got the most Sam Raimi, is when is in the hospital where the arms attacked everyone. That's just a beautiful piece of cinema right there. It's just, it gets all that good hero stuff you like in the movie, the moral questions, and it has one of the, and like if you thought The Dark Knight was satisfying, this movie wraps up in an even more satisfying way. And just from a character perspective, it's a near perfect movie. Coming in at number 7, I believe, 10, 9, 8, yeah, number 7 is Captain America, The Winter Soldier. This movie was one of the first MCU movies where I just was really blown away by it. I believe this movie was 10, I was 10 when I first saw this movie, and I remember just being really kind of in awe with it, particularly once the ending in the third act happened. Like, this might be one of the most well-constructed films of the whole MCU, because MCU kind of has, you know, the formula of great first act, great second act, third act, okay. We've seen a lot of other movies, like Doctor Strange and Shang-Chi. This movie is, like, great from beginning to end. It is a nail-biter. Winter Soldier is such a threatening presence, and, of course, he's not a villain now, we all know this, but, of course, he was a villain in this movie for the majority, and he was absolutely terrifying. Henry Jackman's score is one of the best comic book scores ever in this film, and all the scores to all these movies I have are all really, really good. But even they reuse some of this music in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, like it's just that good. Well, I guess if they can use some, you can just call it a Captain America theme, I guess. But Henry Jackman's score is really, really good. The action sequences are one of the, this is the best action in the whole MCU. Like, I do have other MCU films above this, but when it comes to a pure action standpoint, this one's the most tense. It has the most humor breaks compared to the other films. Like, this movie just really gets it on what my taste is and delivers on everything I want out of a comic book movie, out of a Captain America movie, out of a spy movie, as an action film. It just delivers, and I just love it. This movie flies by every time I watch it. Coming in at number 6 is Joker. This movie was an experience the first time I watched it. I remember the last, 15 minutes of this film was just anxiety heaven. Joker is a different type of comic book film. We all know this. It's the most different out of all the movies on this list. And, of course, we gotta talk about Joaquin Phoenix. Joaquin Phoenix delivered one of the best comic book movie performances in this film. It's not the most action-packed movie ever, but I don't need it to be an action-packed film. This movie looks visually stunning. This movie's cinematography is really, really good, and the score, once again, is amazing. Just the pacing is great. It's like a psychological breakdown that I wanted out of a Joker movie. This movie it was everything I wanted out of it. I remember the trailers had me ridiculously hyped for it. I remember being in the theaters for the first time thinking to myself, I can't believe I'm watching this movie. I was more excited for this movie than I was Avengers Endgame, which came out the same year. But Joker just clicked with me all around as a film. It really is one of those comic book films that just feels out of place, but it feels right at home, if that makes sense. Coming in at number 5 is Captain America: Civil War. This was my favorite Marvel movie for such a long time. This movie, the best part about it is that it just delivers on all, I love comic book media that questions morals, and this movie is definitely one of the more heavy films to do that. Of course, we have other films that did that, but like Batman vs Superman, but that film kind of fell apart in the third act, in my opinion. I know some people will attack me because of me saying that, but it's how I feel. But Captain America: Civil War, like I said with the Winter Soldier, it was just great all 3 acts. The Russos just really have a knack for getting it perfect for the 3-act structure in their Captain America films, because This movie moves, it paces so well, it has those moral questions that like I would expect it, like even in like a Sam Raimi film. On paper, this is one of the better MCU films. Of course, people complain about like the visual look of this movie is when the Marvel kind of went to go downhill, and I do agree with that, but it doesn't bother me as much in this movie as it does some others. It's so great to see our heroes battle it out, but to see it not as a dumb excuse for something else. This movie got personal when it needed to get personal, it delivered on the emotion when it needed to deliver on that. And introduced Spider-Man, introduced Black Panther, introduced all these storylines and all these things, and had all these characters, but yet never felt overstuffed, and that is the biggest accomplishment of this film. This film is very focused, and Captain America is definitely the main character, but we spend all this time with Tony Stark, and you see where everyone's coming from. The film really doesn't pick a side for the most part. There's a couple times where you can kind of think it would take a side, but it's also still a Captain America movie. But I love Civil War. The end battle between Cap and Iron Man is one of the most heartbreaking and beautiful things I've ever seen, and oddly kind of poetic for the Marvel Universe. And this movie set up a lot for the future, and it just is one of those movies why I love the MCU. Like, it just delivered on everything that I would want out of a comic book film. Coming in at number 4 is maybe a hot, it's not really a hot take, but it's a fresh film, and that is Spider-Man No Way Home. Will this be lower next time I do this ranking, if I ever do this ranking again? I don't know, to be honest. It's where I want to put it right now. It's where I feel like it should go, and that's mostly because I just love this movie. And am I biased because spoilers for No Way Home if you haven't seen it yet? The fact that it just delivered on all these Spider-Man universes and put it all into one film and gave you that Spider-Man emotion, and you have all the emotion from those other films to back it up, and this movie builds on it and understands these characters and not just like doing a dull impression of them, is like one of the most awesome things I could have ever asked for. Like, No Way Home could have been something I did not click with, all soulless, lifeless cameos of characters that don't feel like themselves. And just to wrap up on an underwhelming note, this movie explored characters and built upon them, and in a natural way without feeling forced. And the villains in this film, we have multiple, and we have Willem Dafoe back as Green Goblin, and he is better than ever. Once again, Tom Holland giving his best performance as Spider-Man, having his most Spider-Man story out of all of them. I know the first hour of this movie a lot of people don't like, but I don't mind the first hour of this movie. And dare I say, I actually really like the first hour of this movie because it's from, like, I know people criticize this film from a filmmaking standpoint, but I can substitute delivery on emotion with filmmaking. If a movie can't give me emotion and can't give me filmmaking, it probably won't click for me. But a filmmaking could be like at like a 2 out of 10, and the emotion could be at like a 10 out of 10, and I can easily give the movie like a 9 out of 10. Like I did with No Way Home. Like, it just, emotion can deliver a lot in films. Like, we just had Coda win the Best Picture. So it's not necessarily what this film is about. It's filmmaking that's so impressive. It's just the fact that I proved everything wrong about my concerns about this film, gave me everything I wanted as a Spider-Man fan, a lifelong fan of all 3 of these like Spider-Man universes. Even though I don't particularly like the Andrew Garfield movies, like I would still might call myself a fan because I watched them all more than once. So yeah, I love No Way Home. I hope it stays up here on my list, even though it's how I feel now. Maybe I'm in post-hype. I don't know, but we'll see. Coming in at number 3 is Logan. Speaking of delivering on emotion plus filmmaking, this is why this film is so high. This is not only a really good, really well-made film, it's also delivers on the character stuff you want out of Hugh Jackman's Logan's or Wolverine. It just wraps up his story in such a beautiful way, and it doesn't leave stuff open, but leaves it on a positive enough note to really have that satisfying ending. That, and if you don't cry at the end of this movie, like after you like fully like really watched it, you don't have a soul. No offense, it's just it's true. But love everything about Logan. Like, James Mangold did a really good, I probably butchered his last name, but his direction is so good. Like, the movie, like, there's so many shots in this movie that just remained in my head. My favorite shot still just being, like, almost like the silhouette of Logan as the sun's hitting him as he's holding his, ward tags. It just gives you that old man Logan rustic feel that you want, futuristic. You feel old with him. Patrick Stewart gives his best performance as Professor X. You have, I don't remember the, little girl's, X-23's name, but she gave a wonderful performance as well. Performances across the board were amazing. It delivers on emotion. It delivers on brutal, like, Wolverine, fist claw action, and I just love Logan so much. Coming in at number 2 is not a film I have on disc yet, but I have a Funko Pop, and that is The Batman. And I have another Funko Pop right here. I know, I'm showing off. But this movie was just kind of gave me exactly what I wanted at the moment when it came for Batman. And the fact that this is the first entry of the Matt Reeves films, and it's already at my second favorite comic book film of all time. If they improve upon this next one, could this be like the best trilogy of, like, maybe even ever made? Because, my God, I love The Batman. I've seen it like 3 or 4 times now, and it's only been a couple months, and I know it could be another, like with No Way Home, like just another like post-hype thing. That's how I feel right now. You know, in the future, it'll make this video feel dated and make you feel like you're watching something old. So there you go. Well, there's the benefit. But Robert Pattinson as Batman is just maybe one of the most perfect adaptations of the character. His performance is so good. Zoe Kravitz is great as Catwoman. I'm sorry, I cannot think of the actor that plays Gordon in this movie, but he also does a really good job. This movie's cinematography by Greg Fraser, beautiful. Same guy that did Dune. This is like maybe the most well-made film of all comic book films, just maybe ever. Just the action sequences, you feel the punch to it. It just delivers, like Logan, it has that great combination of filmmaking, emotion, and action as well, because this movie has some brutal action. And when you have action sequences that are impressively filmed, you can see everything that's going on instead of like a bunch of jump cuts and you don't know what's happening. It's just satisfying to watch, eye candy to me, knowing I'm watching something of substance, and it's a Batman movie. Like, what more can I ask for in my life? But the Riddler as the villain is absolutely terrifying. He gives off like Zodiac Killer vibes, and it just poetic. The very last 15 minutes of this movie, like where Batman is giving his monologue, is just like some of the most beautifully written pieces of dialogue or monologue in all of comic book media, like ever. The like symbolism that they go with towards the end, so very good. This movie is pushing 3 hours, and I could have watched a 5-hour cut of this movie. This movie has so many memorable sequences. The chase sequence, the nightclub fight, the talk with Alfred and Batman in the hospital is maybe one of my favorite Batman moments, and definitely my favorite moment of this whole movie. It's just everyone came into this movie with their absolute A game, and it delivered into one of the most beautiful and poetic films of all of comic book history. And coming in at number 1, the best comic book film of all time, you're probably able to guess it, it's The Dark Knight. And it was just because it can't be topped. And I will say, it is quite even though I just did say it can't be topped, I am playing tug of war between the Batman and the Dark Knight. Like, I just can't get myself to put the Batman above the Dark Knight, no matter how bad I might want to. But the Dark Knight just, it's aged so well. Like, I put on this movie, and one time my grandma was in the room, I asked her, beautiful IMAX cameras they use. I asked her, I said, what year do you think this was made? Just curious, like, what year? And she thought it was made in 2018 or 2019. And I said, that was 2008. And that obviously blew her mind, but it's mostly due to the fact that 1, IMAX cameras exist, and 2, that Nolan does it practical, like most of the time. He does miniatures. He knows the best way to do action sequences. He just films it beautifully. And Heath Ledger as the Joker is the best comic book performance ever done. Christian Bale's on his A game. Aaron Hagar is on his A game. Everyone is just Maggie Gyllenhaal. Everyone in this movie was just Gary Oldman. I just throw out all these names. Dark Knight is one of the most pulsating comic book films to watch because it's always moving, it's always progressing. You always see as this Joker thread is unraveling itself and having some very tense sequence after tense sequence after tense sequence with twists and turns you don't see coming. All led by great direction, great cinematography, beautiful shots, the best shot in any comic book film, and maybe arguably to me one of the best shots ever on camera is the shot where Joker is escaping from the police department, and he just has his head out the window and he starts shaking it really fast just to cut to that beautiful shot of Batman looking upon the fires or not the fire, but looking upon like the remains of the hospital to find Two-Face's coin and to find out that he makes his own luck. It's just so much detail, so precise. This movie, yes, does lack emotion, but it still provides enough to make me go, yeah, that's good. It's like, even though like not, I wouldn't even say it doesn't lack emotion. It's just I've seen other comic book films do a little bit more, but it still puts Batman through a lot of moral questions. It's just when it comes to like completeness, it's not necessarily whole, but it's also kind of a cliffhanger to The Dark Knight Rises. So it's just a nitpick, and maybe not even a nitpick, because you know what, this film is perfect. I don't care. Like, I could watch this movie all day, every day, all the time, and I will be fine living my life that way, because I love The Dark Knight, and honestly, I love all the films on this list. Like, every single one I talked about, I just love so much. And yeah, that's my top 10 favorite comic book films of all time. I know I did this right before Multiverse of Madness. I think Multiverse is gonna reach this list. Personally, based off the trailers, my expectations, no. But that doesn't mean I still won't like the movie. So yeah. Anyways, like, share, subscribe, and stuff like that. And adios.